The gash on Rex Donovan's left forearm was not the worst thing he had worn into a hospital. That distinction belonged to a night in Flagstaff 11 years ago, a night he did not think about unless he was very tired or very alone, and even then only in pieces. The current wound was 4 inches long, clean-edged, the result of a fence post on a property line. He had been helping a brother settle by hand rather than by argument. It had bled through the gas station paper towel he folded against it, and bled through the second one after that. And by the time he pulled his Harley into the St. Clement's Hospital parking lot in Tulsa on that gray Tuesday afternoon in late October, the electrical tape holding the makeshift bandage in place had gone dark at the edges. He cut the engine. The silence came back the way silence always comes back in parking lots, sudden and total, after the low thunder of a motorcycle. Above the hospital, the sky was the color of old pewter, the kind of sky that promises cold without delivering it, yet that holds everything back and makes the air feel thick and unresolved. Rex sat for a moment on the bike without moving, his right hand resting on the throttle housing from habit, his left arm held slightly away from his body, so the weight of the sleeve did not press against the tape. He was 44 years old and built the way a man gets built when he has been doing physical work since he was 17 and has never had the luxury of stopping. 6 feet 3 inches, 230 pounds of it distributed without waste. The cowhide vest he wore over a black flannel shirt carried the Hell's Iron MC patch on the back, the death's head rendered in the chapter's traditional style, grinning at the world from between crossed pistons. His arms were covered to the wrists in ink, a flaming wheel on the right forearm. Names along the left stacked in plain block letters, 8 of them. Men who had ridden out and not ridden back. His knuckles read iron on the left hand and road on the right. The letters faded from years of weather and use into something that looked less like a declaration and more like a geological fact. He swung off the bike and walked toward the entrance. 2 women coming out of the hospital saw him from 30 feet away and adjusted their path without discussing it. A man holding the door for his elderly mother let it start to close when Rex got close, then thought better of it and held it again, not meeting his eyes. Rex pulled the door open in himself and went in. The smell hit him first, antiseptic and recycled air. And beneath that, something sweeter and more unsettling, the particular institutional sweetness of a building that processed human suffering at volume and had learned to keep the smell manageable. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors the color of dirty cream, a television in the corner of the waiting area running a cooking show on mute, the host gesturing at something in a pan with exaggerated enthusiasm, while the sound was stripped away entirely. 4 rows of plastic chairs, maybe 2/3 full. Rex walked to the reception desk. The young man behind it, early 20s name tag reading Paul, looked up from his screen and went through the sequence Rex had watched hundreds of times. The eyes tracking up, reading the patch, reading the tattoos, reading the face, running the rapid calculation. The conclusion of that calculation was always fear, or something that lived in the same house as fear and borrowed its furniture. "I need stitches," Rex said. He peeled back the electrical tape and the paper towel enough to show the gash. Fence post. Paul's eyes moved from the wound to Rex's face and back again. "Of course," he said. "Insurance card and photo ID." Rex produced both. Paul processed them with hands that were not entirely steady. A security guard materialized from somewhere near the hallway entrance, heavy-set, mid-50s gray mustache, the build of a man who had been more formidable 15 years ago and was carrying the memory of that formidability as a credential. He positioned himself 6 feet to Rex's left and did not try to be subtle about it. Rex did not acknowledge him. He took the visitor's sticker Paul printed, pressed it to his vest without looking at it, and found a seat in the far corner of the waiting room, away from the other patients. A mother with a toddler in her lap pulled the child slightly closer. An old man in a John Deere cap stared openly until Rex looked at him, then found something interesting on the ceiling. A teenage girl kept glancing over her shoulder at him between texts, each glance quicker and more compulsive than the last. Rex had a paperback in his jacket pocket. He read 4 pages without retaining any of it, then folded the corner and put it away. He watched the muted cooking show for a while. The host finished whatever he had been making and presented it to a panel of 3 people who tasted it and reacted with expressions of pure, transported joy. Rex looked at the clock on the wall. It was 4:11 in the afternoon. 29 minutes later, a nurse appeared at the waiting room door and called his name. She was not what he had been expecting, and he had not been expecting anything in particular, which made the disconnect sharper. June Carver was about 52, maybe 5'6", with dark brown hair pulled back in a practical knot at the base of her neck, and green eyes that moved over him with the calm, unhurried efficiency of someone who had been assessing people in distress for a long time and had long since stopped letting external signals determine her internal response. She held a clipboard at her side. She did not glance at the security guard. She walked directly to Rex and extended her hand. "Mr. Donovan, I'm June. I'll be taking care of you today." He shook her hand. Her grip was firm, unhesitating. "Rex," he said. "Rex," she repeated the way people repeat a name when they are actually filing it rather than just acknowledging it. "Let's get that arm looked at." She led him down the corridor at the pace of someone who had walked these halls enough times that the distance no longer existed for her as distance, but simply as a series of tasks. She asked intake questions. When did it happen? How deep did it feel at the time? Any numbness in the fingers? She listened to his answers without editorializing and wrote them down. He was a source of information. She was a person who needed that information. The dynamic required nothing else. In the exam room, she examined the wound under better light, probing gently at the edges with gloved fingers, and told him he needed 8 stitches, that it was clean, that he had done right, washing it out even if a gas station bathroom was not the ideal sterile environment for that operation. "You will feel the anesthetic going in," she said, preparing the suture kit. "Tell me if it is too much." "It won't be." She looked at him, then a brief measuring look that he could not quite read the exact content of. "I believe you," she said. She worked with the methodical precision of someone who had done this particular procedure enough times that her hands knew it without requiring her full attention. She talked to him during it not to distract him. He could tell the difference, but because she was the kind of person who thought out loud when she was comfortable, asking him about the fence post situation in a tone that conveyed genuine curiosity rather than small talk obligation. He told her about Cal's property line dispute. She listened and asked a follow-up question about whether the dispute had been resolved, and he told her it had been for now. And she said that was one of the things about fence line arguments. They had a tendency to hibernate rather than die. He found himself agreeing. When she finished, she dressed the wound neatly and gave him aftercare instructions with the brisk thoroughness of someone who expected them to be followed. "Keep it dry 48 hours. Sutures out in 10 days. See your regular doctor or come back here if you do not have one." He was about to stand when she spoke again. The difference was immediate, not dramatic, not theatrical, but completely unmistakable. Whatever professional register she had been operating in shifted at a level below the surface the way weather shifts before you can see it in the sky. She was still looking at the clipboard. Her pen was still moving as though she were writing normal notes. But the muscles along her jaw had tightened, and there was a stillness in her shoulders that had not been there 60 seconds ago. "Mr. Donovan," she said, her voice just above her breath, "before you leave." He waited. "Check room 12. She did not look up. "End of this hall," she said. "Left side." Then she gave him a professionally neutral nod, picked up her clipboard, and walked out. Rex sat in the exam room for a moment after the door closed, looking at the space where she had been. The cooking show was still playing somewhere at a low volume through the thin walls of the corridor. Down the hall, someone was laughing, a loose, relieved laugh, the laugh of someone who had just received good news. He looked at the bandage on his forearm. Then he stood up, put on his vest, and walked left. The corridor narrowed slightly as it extended toward the back of the wing. The sounds of the hospital beeping monitors, the distant percussion of a meal cart murmured conversations at the nursing station near the center of the hall faded as he moved further from them. Room numbers counted down on the doors to his left. 14, 13, 12. He stopped. The door to the room 12 was partly open. Through the gap, he could see the edge of a hospital bed, the pale blue of a privacy curtain, the corner of a window with the gray October sky outside it. From somewhere inside came the faint sound of a cartoon, bright synthesized music and exaggerated sound effects, the kind of show that works hard to be cheerful. Rex pushed the door open slowly and stepped inside. The boy was sitting up in the bed closest to the window. He looked to be about 9 small for his age, with close-cropped brown hair and dark circles under his eyes that were too deep and too settled to have come from a few nights of poor sleep in a hospital. His left wrist was in a brace. A bandage covered the area above his right eyebrow. His face under the fluorescent light was a map of damage in various stages of healing. A fading bruise along the left cheekbone gone to yellow-green. A sutured cut above the ear. The particular flatness in his eyes that comes not from a lack of feeling, but from a very long practice of concealing it. The boy looked at Rex. Rex looked at the boy. He waited for the flinch, the drawing back, the instinctive alarm. He was accustomed to being the thing in a room that people wanted to put distance between themselves and. The boy did not flinch. He looked at Rex with eyes that were dark and careful and very old, and he simply waited to see what Rex would do. "Hey," Rex said. "Hey," the boy said back. "What are you watching?" The boy glanced at the television. "I don't know, it was on." Rex pulled the visitor's chair from the wall and positioned it beside the bed. The plastic seat groaned under his weight when he sat down. "What is your name?" "Danny." "Danny what?" "Briggs. Rex Donovan." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, bringing himself closer to the boy's eye level. "That wrist," he said, "and the rest of it. How did that happen?" Danny looked at the television. "I fell," he said. The words came out flat and smooth and preformed the way a line comes out when it has been repeated often enough to lose the texture of actual speech. There was no micro-hesitation in it, no searching for words, no construction happening. It was retrieval. Rex had heard that specific quality in a voice before. He had used it himself once a very long time ago, in circumstances he did not spend time revisiting. The body remembers the shape of certain lies even when the mind no longer wants to tell them. "I fell" was not a memory, it was a program. He did not push, he sat back. "How long have you been here?" 3 days. "Anyone been to see you?" A pause, just a beat too long. "My stepdad came yesterday." "Your mom?" Danny's jaw moved. "She is in a different hospital," he said. His voice did not break, but it thinned at the edges, the way a piece of paper thins when you fold it too many times in the same place. "She got hurt too, when I fell." Rex was quiet. Outside the window, a cloud crossed what was left of the afternoon light, and the room dimmed for a moment. Down the hall, the monitor beeped in its steady, indifferent rhythm, marking time for someone. "Is your stepdad coming back?" Rex asked. "Tonight," Danny said. "He said he would come after work." The boy's eyes were on the cartoon, but he was not watching it. "He is going to talk to the doctor about taking me home." There was something behind the words, not anticipation, the absolute opposite of anticipation, the way a person braces before cold water, already contracting against what is coming. Rex stood up. "I will be right back," he said. He found June Carver at the nursing station updating a chart. She did not look up when he approached, but he could see from the shift in her posture that she knew he was there. Had been tracking his footsteps from room 12. The way a person tracks sounds they have been waiting for without admitting they are waiting. "The boy," Rex said. "Danny Briggs, room 12. She kept her eyes on the chart, her voice low and even. "Admitted 72 hours ago. Multiple contusions. Fractured left wrist. Lacerations consistent with blunt force trauma. The official report says he fell down the back porch steps." "His mother?" "Lakewood Regional. Admitted the same night. Fractured orbital socket. Broken collarbone." She paused. "Also fell." "Who is the attending?" "Dr. Howard Pruitt." She finally looked up. He reviewed the file. He determined there is no basis for a mandatory child welfare referral. "And you think he is wrong?" She held his gaze for a long moment. The green eyes were steady. "I think Danny Briggs is going home tonight with the man who put him in this hospital," she said. "And when he comes back, if he comes back, it will be worse." She set the chart down on the counter. "I filed 2 internal reports. My supervisor, Wanda Teal, told me I was reading into things. Pruitt told me the family had been through a difficult period and that stress produces accidents." She glanced down the hall toward room 12. "I called DHS this morning from my personal cell phone. They said they would send someone in 3 to 5 business days for a preliminary inquiry." 3 to 5 days, Rex said. "His stepdad comes tonight." She said it without inflection, just as a fact placed beside another fact, so that the space between them could speak. Rex was quiet for a moment. "Why me?" he asked. "Of all the people in that waiting room." She considered this. "In my experience," she said, "people who look the way you look do not get told to stand down and then actually stand down." She paused. "And you looked at Paul at the front desk like he was just a person doing a job. Not like you expected him to be afraid of you." Another pause shorter. "And I am out of options. That boy needs someone who will not be moved." She held his gaze. "I did not have anyone else to ask." Rex looked back down the corridor toward room 12. What is the stepdad's name, he said. Garrett Sloan. What time does he usually show up? Last 2 nights between 6 and 6:30. Rex checked his watch, 4:47. Okay, he said. He stepped outside to the parking lot and called Cal from beside his bike. His brother picked up on the third ring. The background sounds of the garage, audible behind his voice. The hiss of a pneumatic tool, a country station playing low. Cal Donovan had left the Iron Road chapter 4 years ago cleanly, without the kind of exit that required allegiances to be declared. He ran an auto shop in Broken Arrow now. Had a wife named Marie, 2 kids a yard, with a dog named Copper that barked at clouds. It was a life that existed at a different angle to the world than Rex's own, and he had never said what he thought about that, not in the direction of judgment and not in the direction of envy. Rex, Cal said, "What is up?" "I need a favor." Brief silence. "What kind?" "Legal kind," Rex told him. The boy, the injuries, the attending physician who had reviewed the file and found nothing requiring action. The DHS timeline. The stepdad arriving tonight to collect a 9-year-old with a fractured wrist and a face that told a story the official report refused to hear. Cal listened without interrupting. The pneumatic tool went quiet somewhere in the background. "You remember Harkins," Rex said. "The DA's office." Cal was quiet for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "I remember Harkins. Call him. Tell him there is a kid at St. Clement's Hospital, room 12. Danny Briggs, 9 years old. Injuries consistent with abuse. Attending physician, cleared it. DHS is 3 to 5 days out. The stepfather, Garrett Sloan, is coming tonight to take him home." He paused. "The mother is at Lakewood Regional. Same story. Worse injuries." Another silence. The dog was barking somewhere in the background at Cal's shop. "You are going to stay there," Cal said. It was not quite a question. "Yeah, you know how that is going to go. You know what they are going to say when a fully patched biker is sitting in a kid's hospital room when the kid's stepfather shows up." "I know." "Rex." Longer pause. "Harkins owes me," Cal said finally. "I will call him. You be careful." "Always." He went back inside. The next 40 minutes passed differently than he had expected. He had thought Danny would be guarded or frightened of him in the way that children are sometimes frightened of physical size and reputation, the instinctive alarm that a large, heavily tattooed man can trigger in a child who has been hurt by large men. But Danny Briggs watched him settle back into the plastic chair and seemed to make some internal calculation and then simply accepted his presence the way a dog accepts the presence of a stranger once it has decided the stranger is not a threat. They watched the cartoon together for a while without commentary. A dinner tray arrived, pale chicken breast and green beans, the color of fatigue, and a carton of apple juice. Danny ate mechanically without appetite in the way of someone fueling a body they have learned not to think about too much. He pushed the tray aside. The cartoon ended and another began. "You have family?" Danny asked eventually. His eyes were on the screen. "A brother. Are you close?" Rex thought about it honestly. "We were not for a long time. We are getting there." Danny nodded slowly as though this confirmed something in a hypothesis he had been running. "My real dad lives in Tucson," he said. "I have not seen him since I was 4. Rex said nothing. "He sends birthday cards sometimes. He spelled my name wrong once. Danny with an I. Danny." The boy said it without apparent bitterness, just as a data point, a thing that had happened in the ledger of things that had happened. He was quiet for a moment. "How long has your stepdad been in the picture?" Rex asked. 3 years. Danny looked at his braced wrist. He was not always like this. Rex did not say anything to that. Some silences need to be left the shape they are. "He lost his job in the spring," Danny continued. His voice was flat, reciting. "After that, things got—" He trailed off. The trailing off contained more than any completed sentence would have. At 6:08, Wanda Teal appeared in the doorway of room 12. She was a compact woman in her early 50s, with the particular authority of someone who had spent decades managing both patients and the people responsible for them. And she took in what she found in room 12 with the expression of someone who has encountered a situation she knows how to handle, but would have preferred not to find. "Sir," she said, "I am going to need you to leave this room." "I am visiting," Rex said. "You are not listed as a family member or an approved visitor for this patient." Rex turned to Danny. "Do you mind if I stay?" The boy looked at Wanda, then at Rex. He shook his head. "He says he does not mind," Rex said. A muscle moved in Wanda's jaw. "That is not how this works. You need to leave voluntarily or I will call security." "Call security," Rex said pleasantly. She did. Carl, the security guard, whose last name Rex now knew from the full badge was Eddings, appeared within 3 minutes and stood in the doorway with his thumbs in his belt, in the posture of a man preparing for something he had not entirely decided on yet. Behind Carl, Dr. Howard Pruitt materialized, late 50s, silver-haired, with the bearing of a man accustomed to being the most consequential person in whatever room he entered. He looked at Rex the way certain men look at things they have already categorized and have no interest in recategorizing. I am Dr. Pruitt. This is a medical facility. You have no authorized reason to be in this patient's room. I am a concerned citizen, Rex said. You are a liability. I am a person sitting in a chair. Rex's voice was even. If you want to explain to the Tulsa Police Department why you are attempting to remove a private citizen from a voluntary conversation with a patient who has not asked him to leave, you are welcome to make that call. Pruitt's face went through something. Don't be glib with me. I am not being glib. I am sitting in a chair, and that is all I am doing. He held Pruitt's gaze. You want to call the police, call them. I will be here when they arrive. Pruitt looked at Danny. Danny, his voice shifted into the practiced warmth of a man performing competence. Are you comfortable with this man in your room? Danny looked at Rex. Then he looked at Pruitt. He is my friend, the boy said. Something moved quickly across Pruitt's face, the shadow of a recalculation. He straightened. I will be back in an hour, he told Wanda. Mr. Sloan should be arriving shortly. Have the discharge paperwork ready. He turned and left. Carl remained in the doorway, uncertain. You can go, Rex told him. I am not going anywhere. Carl looked at Wanda. Wanda looked at Rex. Then she left too, with the posture of someone who has chosen to escalate through channels rather than in person. Danny exhaled slowly after the door had been closed. He pulled his knees up under the blanket. Rex. He said the name quietly, like testing it. Yeah, are you going to get in trouble for being here? No. You sure I am? Sure. The boy thought about this. They sat in the quiet room together, and the clock on the wall moved, and the monitor somewhere down the hall beeped its indifferent rhythm, and outside the October sky went from pewter to the deep bruised purple of early evening. Rex's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Cal. He stepped into the corridor. Tell me, Rex said. Harkins came through. Cal's voice was quiet, efficient. He called Child Crisis Services. Different branch from DHS. Faster response time. He has got a caseworker en route, should arrive within the hour. A pause. He also ran Sloan. Rex leaned against the wall. Go ahead. Garrett Allen Sloan, 41. Tulsa County. 2 years ago, there was a domestic disturbance call at a prior address. Charges were dropped. And there is a restraining order in 2019 from a prior wife. She filed it and then let it lapse 6 months later. Name of the prior wife. Cal was quiet for just a moment. Sandra Briggs, he said. Rex closed his eyes for 1 second. That is the boy's mother. Yeah. Harkins noticed it too. Same woman, Rex. She was with him before. She left, she came back, or he found her again, one or the other. The boy has been living with this man before. Maybe not this bad, but this man. His voice was flat and careful. The voice he used when he was controlling something. Harkins is talking to the on-call DA now about an emergency protective order. How long? Within the hour, he said. Maybe sooner. Rex looked down the hall. Near the nursing station, he could see Pruitt standing with a man in work clothes, a canvas jacket, contractor's build. They were talking in the low two men who know each other register that had nothing to do with medicine. He had seen Sloan once already from 20 feet, not knowing yet that it was him before he went to make the call. Now he looked at the body language between Pruitt and Sloan and understood some things that the file had not said. I will be inside, Rex told Cal. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid, Cal exhaled. Call me when it is done. Rex went back into room 12 and sat down. Danny had pulled the blanket up to his chest. He was watching the doorway. He looked at Rex when Rex came in, and something in the set of his small face shifted very slightly, a loosening of something that had been held very tight. He is out there, Danny said. I saw him through the window in the door. Rex nodded. I know. He was with Dr. Pruitt. I know that too. The boy's good hand was gripping the edge of the blanket. They know each other from before he said, they play golf. Pruitt told my stepdad that the first day I was here. His voice was very quiet, like he was letting my stepdad know it would be okay. Rex said nothing. He sat in the chair and did not move, and the room held around them both, and the cartoon light flickered on the wall. And outside, in the parking lot of St. Clement's Hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma, the evening came down over everything like a held breath about to break. Danny said quietly. Yeah, you talked to him before. About what to say. Danny was quiet for the moment. He said it was important that I remember what happened, so I could tell the doctor the right way. The boy's voice was very steady. That was a thing to note, the steadiness, the control in a 9-year-old's voice when talking about this. It spoke to how long the control had been practiced. I have been practicing for a long time, Danny said, as if reading the thought. Rex looked at him. Saying the right thing, Danny said. The boy looked at the cartoon on the television without seeing it. You get so good at it, he said, that you start to wonder if you even remember anymore what the other thing was. Rex leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and he looked at Danny Briggs' 9 years old, fractured, wrist-sutured face eyes that had been old since before he had earned the right to have old eyes. And he said quietly, and I remember it for you, you do not have to carry that part. The boy looked at him for a long time. Then he looked back at the television. The cartoon was ending. Something was being resolved. Something was being saved. The sound effects rose and peaked and then settled into the bright, cheerful theme music that always plays at the end when the right things have happened, when the danger has passed. Outside in the corridor, the footsteps of Garrett Sloan moved toward the nursing station, and Dr. Howard Pruitt's voice joined them, and down at the other end of the hall, something else was approaching, something that had been set in motion by a phone call from a garage in Broken Arrow, and a debt being paid between two men who had been to school together a long time ago. Rex sat in the plastic chair and did not move, and the room held, and the clock moved, and Danny Briggs breathed beside him in the quiet. Garrett Sloan arrived in the doorway of room 12 at 6:24. Rex heard him first. Footsteps in the corridor with a particular quality to them, the deliberate space-assuming walk of a man accustomed to rooms adjusting themselves to accommodate him rather than the other way around. Then he filled the doorway, and Rex got a clear look. Sloan was 41, thick through the shoulders, with a close-trimmed beard, going gray at the sides, and eyes the shallow pale blue of water over flat rock. He was in work clothes, canvas jacket, a company logo on the breast, a man who looked like a foreman or a site supervisor, someone who told other men what to do in the practical physical world and had always found it easy. He looked ordinary. That was the thing about him. He looked completely and entirely ordinary. He saw Rex and stopped. Not out of fear, Rex could read the difference. It was the expression of a man who has walked into a situation assuming one set of conditions and found another who is now rapidly reassessing without wanting to show that he is doing it. His eyes moved from Rex to Danny, to the Hell's Iron patch on Rex's vest, and back to Danny. What is this? Sloan said. Evening, Rex said. Who are you? I am a friend of Danny's. Sloan's voice tightened at the center of it, control applied quickly, the practiced reflex of a man who has learned to manage what shows on his face. Why are you in my stepson's room? Stepson, Danny said from the bed quietly. Just the one word delivered without emphasis, and the correction landed the way small, true things sometimes land harder than loud ones. Sloan's eyes moved to the boy with a speed that was reflexive, and in the fraction of a second before he smoothed it out, before the professional pleasantness reasserted itself, Rex saw it. Quick, hot, the anger of a man who is accustomed to having his framings accepted without correction, who experienced the correction as a provocation regardless of how it was intended. It was there and gone before Danny could have read it, but Rex was watching for it, and he read it clearly. Danny, Sloan said, his voice shifting into assembled warmth. Buddy, how are you feeling? Okay, Danny said. Sloan looked at Rex again. I am going to need you to leave. This is a private family matter. I was invited, Rex said. By who? By Danny. Sloan's jaw moved. He was calculating. Rex could see it the way he could see the seams in the calculation, sizing him up, reading the patch, reading the size, deciding whether to push. He chose a different register. Look, he said, going for reasonable man-to-man, a tone that probably worked well with the men he supervised. I do not know what you think you know, but this is none of your business. Danny had an accident. His mother had an accident. These things happen. He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. I know how it looks. I know how a stranger looking from the outside reads this situation. But this family has had a rough year, and we do not need someone making things harder. I am not making anything harder, Rex said. I am sitting in a chair. I would like you to leave. I know. Sloan went through something internal. Then he straightened. I am going to speak with the doctor, he said. He looked at Danny. Buddy, start getting your things together. He held the boy's eyes for just a moment. The look had nothing in it that would read to any observer as threat. It was perfectly ordinary. And Danny's hand under the blanket, the good hand, closed around the edge of the mattress and went white at the knuckles. Sloan left. Rex did not move. Danny, he said quietly. Yeah, Rex, Danny said. Dr. Pruitt likes him. They went to the same college or something. He told my stepdad that the first day. The boy's voice was steady, but his hands were not. His good hand was gripping the blanket over his lap, the knuckles pale. Rex's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Cal. He stepped into the corridor just far enough to take the call. Tell me, he said. Harkins came through, Cal said. He called Child Crisis Services, not DHS. Different branch, faster response. They have got a caseworker en route. Should be there within the hour. A pause. He also ran web. Cal stopped, corrected himself. Sloan. Garrett Allen, Sloan, 41, Tulsa County. Domestic disturbance called 2 years ago at a prior address. Charges were dropped. Prior wife filed a restraining order in 2019. Let it lapse. Cal's voice was flat, reciting facts. The DA is working on an emergency protective order right now. Rex leaned against the corridor wall. Down the hall, he could see Sloan talking to Dr. Pruitt near the nursing station, gesturing. Pruitt was nodding. How long, Rex said. He said within the hour, maybe faster. Cal paused. Don't do anything stupid. Define stupid. I will call you. He hung up. Rex walked back into room 12. Webb and Pruitt appeared 2 minutes later. There was a different quality to Pruitt's authority now. It had been reinforced by Sloan's presence, by the logic of the situation asserting itself. He came in like a man who had been given permission to resolve something. Mr. Donovan, he said, I have spoken with Mr. Sloan, Danny's legal guardian, and he has formally requested that you vacate this room. If you refuse, I will contact hospital security and the Tulsa Police Department. Call them, Rex said. Pruitt blinked. This was not the expected response. I want to be clear, Rex continued, keeping his voice even, that I am not threatening anyone. I am not obstructing medical care, and I am not in violation of any law by being in this room. Danny has not asked me to leave. His legal guardian can request security or police, and I will speak to them calmly when they get here. He paused. So let us call them. You are deliberately interfering with a patient discharge. The discharge has not begun. I am sitting in a chair. Brooke appeared in the doorway. She was holding a tablet with both hands, and her expression was carefully controlled. But her eyes found Rex's, and there was something in them, something that had shifted since he had last seen her. Something like hope with an edge on it. Dr. Pruitt, she said, there is a woman at the nursing station from Child Crisis Services. The room went silent. Pruitt turned to look at her. What? Child Crisis Services, June repeated. Caseworker. She is asking to speak with the attending physician for Danny Briggs. A pause. And there is a Tulsa PD officer with her. Sloan's face changed, not dramatically, not the way it would change in a movie. It was subtler than that. A slight loss of color, a stiffening around the eyes, the micro-expression of a man who has just heard a door close on an exit he was counting on. He looked at Danny. Danny looked back at him, and in the boy's eyes, for the first time since Rex had walked into this room, there was something new. Not relief yet, not safety, but the first faint, careful loosening of the wire that had been coiled tight in his chest for however long it had been coiled there. Sloan looked at Rex. Rex met his gaze and held it. And whatever Sloan saw there, whatever was in the face of a 44-year-old man who had lived a life that had made him very hard to intimidate and very impossible to move when he had decided not to move, it was enough. Sloan stepped back. He did not say anything. He stepped back into the corridor. And a moment later, Rex heard his footsteps, that heavy, deliberate walk moving away down the hall. Pruitt remained in the doorway for a moment longer, his expression cycling through something complicated. Then he too left. Rex sat down. Danny let out a breath. Long, slow, the breath of a child who had been holding it for longer than a breath can reasonably be held. Is it over? He asked. It is starting to be, Rex said. The caseworker's name was Lorna Hicks, 30s efficient with the calm, focused energy of someone who had seen enough to be moved by it and still had not stopped being moved by it. She was a compact woman in dark slacks and a gray blazer, carrying a canvas bag over one shoulder and a tablet in her other hand, and she moved through the corridor of St. Clement's Hospital with the brisk, contained energy of someone who understood that the time between a call and an arrival was time that mattered. Officer Dent Reeves walked beside her. He was mid-40s, Tulsa PD, with the patient, unhurried quality of a man who had been on the job long enough to know that calm was a tool and that using it well required practice. He did not put his hand on his belt. He walked like a person who was here to do a specific thing and intended to do it correctly. Lorna knocked on the frame of room 12 and looked in. She introduced herself to Danny in the particular manner of someone who has been trained to make direct and unhurried eye contact with children in medical settings to communicate with the eyes before the voice. She asked if it was okay to come in and talk for a few minutes. Danny looked at Rex. Rex nodded once. Okay, the boy said. Rex stood up from the chair. He moved toward the door, not because Lorna had asked him to, but because the conversation that was about to happen needed to happen without him in it. Danny's eyes followed him to the door. Rex stopped in the frame and looked back. I will be right outside, he said. Danny held his gaze for a moment, then he nodded. Rex stepped into the corridor and pulled the door most of the way closed behind him. He leaned against the wall beside it. He could hear Lorna's voice inside, unhurried and measured, asking Danny how he was feeling, whether he was comfortable, whether there was anything he needed. The voice of someone who understood that the first minutes of a conversation like this were not about gathering information. They were about establishing the condition under which information could be shared. June Carver came down the corridor from the nursing station and stopped beside Rex. She leaned against the opposite wall and they stood facing each other across the width of the corridor without speaking. After a moment, June said Pruitt filed a counter-complaint 3 minutes ago. Interference with patient care. Rex looked at her. Through the proper channels, she said. He has that right, she paused. So do I. I submitted a formal complaint about his handling of this case 20 minutes ago. She looked at her hands. Wanda is going to have a very difficult week. How long have you known, Rex asked. About Danny? She thought about it. I noticed it the first day, she said. The way he positioned himself in the bed. Always with a line of sight to the door. The quality of his stillness. The way he answered questions, the specific flatness of it, the lack of retrieval. She paused. When I was 28, I worked a summer at a shelter in Memphis before I came back to nursing. She looked down the corridor. You see it once enough times, she said, and you do not unsee it. Rex leaned against the wall. He thought about the conversation in the exam room, the way her voice had changed, the pen still moving, as though writing normal notes, the 3 words given to him like a piece of contraband, check room 12, and the walk she had made back out of that room, knowing that she was betting on a man she had known for 20 minutes based on nothing more verifiable than the way he had looked at a frightened kid behind a reception desk. What if I had not stayed, Rex said. June was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I would have thought of something else. She looked at him. But I am glad I did not have to. Inside the room, Lorna Hicks's voice had settled into a rhythm, the questions coming evenly. No urgency in them, no pressure. And then underneath it, Danny's voice beginning to enter the space she was making. Not the flat, preformed voice. Something else. Something with texture and hesitation and retrieval in it. The voice of actual memory, rather than the voice of a rehearsed account. He was describing something. Rex could not make out the exact words. But the quality of the voice was unmistakable. It was the voice of a person remembering something true. At the end of the corridor near the elevators, Garrett Sloan was still standing. Rex became aware of him without looking directly. The peripheral awareness of someone who has spent enough of his life in situations where knowing where the other person is matters. Sloan had gone very still. He was no longer talking to Pruitt. Pruitt had moved away. Sloan stood alone near the elevator bank with his hands in his pockets. Rex looked at him directly now. Sloan looked back. Across the length of the corridor, across the nursing station, in the humming fluorescent lights, in the institutional quietness of a hospital evening, the 2 men looked at each other. It was not a confrontation. Rex was not doing anything other than standing against a wall. But in the looking, in the sustained and unapologetic looking, something was being said that was more precise than words would have been. Rex was saying, I see you, not the version you present, the thing underneath. I have been in this corridor for 2 hours and I have been doing nothing other than seeing you, and I have not been moved, and I will not be moved. Sloan was the one who looked away. He looked at the elevator panel. He pressed the button. The elevator opened. He stood there for a moment with the doors open to his back to Rex. Then he stepped inside and the doors closed. Rex exhaled slowly. He did not move. Officer Reeves came down the corridor from the nursing station. He stopped beside Rex, not crowding him, positioning himself at a professional angle. You the one who called in the report, Reeves asked. My brother called, Rex said. He passed it to someone at the DA's office. They called you. Reeves made a note. The man who just left in the elevator. Sloan. He will not go far, Rex said. He knows we have his name. Reeves looked at him steadily. You are right about that, he said. There is an officer in the lobby. He paused. Harkins called me directly. He said to tell you the protective order is being processed right now. Should have it within the hour. Rex nodded. Reeves looked at the door to room 12. How is the boy? Talking, Rex said. Reeves made another note. That is the main thing, he said quietly, and turned and walked back toward the nursing station. Inside room 12, Danny Briggs was talking. The voice that came through the door was not a child reciting a program. It was a child remembering the specific quality of actual memory, with its gaps and its forward jumps, and the particular weight it put on certain details that might seem small to an outside observer, but had been sitting in the center of the remembering person for a very long time. He was describing the parking lot in May, the absence of ice, the side of the truck, the way he had been at the window when it happened, and the way he had been inside the house when Sloan came back in, and the way the room had felt different after that, like the air itself had changed into something that required more careful breathing. Rex listened. He did not move. He stood with his back against the wall of the corridor in St. Clement's Hospital in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and he listened to a 9-year-old tell the truth for what was likely the first time, and he stayed in place the way a thing stays in place when it has decided to stay. June Carver was still standing across from him. She was looking at the floor now, listening too, and there was something in the line of her shoulders, the particular quality of it, that Rex recognized as the posture of a person carrying a weight and finally being able to set a portion of it down. After a while, she said his mother. Lakewood Regional. I called over there 40 minutes ago to tell them what was happening here. A nurse named Renata picks up the phone and I explain the situation and she goes quiet for a moment and then she says Sandra Briggs has already started talking. She said she has been waiting to hear that Danny was safe. June paused. She said Sandra has been waiting for her son to be safe before she said anything, because she did not know who to trust, and she was afraid that if she said the wrong thing to the wrong person, Sloan would find out before she had a chance to. Rex said nothing for a moment. Then he said the prior restraining order. She filed it and let it lapse. June nodded. She got it in 2019. Let it expire in 6 months. She was with him before. She left and he found her again, or she came back, one or the other. People think leaving is simple, June said. Like it is just a decision you make and you walk out. They do not see what gets built around a person over the years, what gets taken away, what gets used against them. She paused. Sandra Briggs is lying in a hospital right now with a broken collarbone and a fractured eye socket, and she is talking because her son is safe. That is not a weak woman. That is a woman who has been holding something together with nothing left to hold with, and who is finally being told she does not have to hold it anymore. Rex was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I need to tell you something about what Cal found when he ran Sloan. June looked at him. The prior wife who filed the restraining order in 2019. Her name was Sandra Briggs. June went very still. Same woman, Rex said. Danny's mother. She was with him before this. She left, came back, or he tracked her down again. Either way, the boy has been living in proximity to this man for longer than 3 years. Maybe it was different the first time, maybe not as bad. But this is not the first family Sloan has put through this. June looked at the door to room 12. She pressed one hand flat against the corridor wall the way a person steadies themselves when the ground has shifted under them. Then she straightened. She said, I am going to make sure that information is in the report Lorna Hicks files tonight. It needs to be in the file before the DA sees it in the morning. Rex nodded. They stood in the corridor and let the weight of it settle, and neither of them said anything. And down the hall inside room 12, a boy named Danny Briggs was still talking. At 7:18, the door to room 12 opened. Lorna Hicks stepped out, her tablet under her arm, her expression, the expression of someone whose suspicions had been confirmed, and who took no pleasure in the confirmation but was steady in the face of it. She looked at June. Danny has made a statement, she said, consistent with the physical evidence and inconsistent with the mechanism reported. She looked at her tablet. We are filing for an emergency protective order tonight. Sloan will be contacted for questioning. She looked at Rex. Officer Reeves has already told me Sloan left the building. He knows, Rex said. He will have a lawyer by morning. Lorna nodded. That is his right. She paused. It will not change the order. She looked at the door to room 12. Danny asked me a question at the end of the interview. What did he ask? He asked whether the man in the corridor was still going to be there when she came out. Rex looked at the door. I told him I did not know, Lorna said, but that I was fairly confident. Rex went back inside. Danny was lying back against the pillows. The blanket pulled up, the good hand resting open on the mattress beside him, no longer gripping. He looked at Rex when he came back in. The lines of his face had changed, not dramatically, not the way they would change in a movie with a clear before and after. It was subtler than that, a slight loosening around the eyes. The absence of something that had been present since Rex first walked into this room, something that lived in the particular tension of a face that is always braced. Did you hear it? Danny asked. What I said. I heard some of it. Is it enough? I think so. Rex sat back down in the plastic chair. The chair groaned. Yes, he said. I think it is enough. Danny looked at the ceiling. Then he said she is going to be mad at me. Your mom, for telling. She always said not to tell, not because she wanted to protect him. She wanted to protect me. She thought if I told someone and it did not work, it would be worse. Rex looked at him. She is telling too, he said. Right now, at the other hospital. Danny went still. She has been waiting to hear that you were safe before she said anything. The boy stared at the ceiling. His jaw moved once. He did not cry, not in the way that is visible and audible. But something happened in his face that was as honest as crying, and more costly, the expression of a person discovering that the thing they had been afraid might not be true is true. After all, that the person they were trying to protect was also trying to protect them, that they had been in their respective hospitals on their respective nights doing the same thing. After a while, he said, she is going to be okay. I think she is going to be better than okay, Rex said. I think she is going to be free. Danny absorbed this. He looked at the window at the dark sky and the amber lights of the parking lot below. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, will you stay until they come to take me somewhere? I will stay, Rex said. Okay. They sat together in the room and the clock moved and the hospital breathed around them in its steady institutional rhythm. And down the hall, Officer Reeves was making calls. And at Lakewood Regional Hospital across town, a woman named Sandra Briggs was talking into the careful listening of a nurse named Renata. And in the lobby of St. Clement's, a second officer was watching the entrance. And in the DA's office on the other side of the city, the machinery of the emergency protective order was turning through its required steps, each one measured and necessary, each one moving toward the same point. At 7:42 June, Carver came to the doorway of room 12. There is a foster family on the way, she said. She is a woman named Ruth June, told Danny. She has been doing this for a while. She is good at it. She paused. She will bring you some snacks, and then she will take you somewhere safe tonight. Just for tonight, and then more will be figured out. But tonight you will be safe, she paused again. Your mom is getting the same kind of help right now. Different hospital, same idea. Danny looked at Rex. Rex looked back. I know, Danny said. He told me. June looked at Rex with the green eyes that had assessed him in an exam room 4 hours ago and found him something other than what his appearance advertised. She looked at him for a moment, and then she said, I'm going to finish my shift. She turned and walked back down the corridor. Rex looked at the boy. Tell me something, Danny said. What? Something that is true. He looked at Rex directly with the ancient, careful eyes. Something that is actually true and not just something you say to make me feel better. Rex thought about it honestly. He leaned back in the groaning plastic chair and looked at the ceiling and thought about what was actually true and what was only true in the sense of being the thing people said in situations like this one. After a while, he said, it is going to be hard. For a while, it is going to be harder than tonight because tonight you can see where the hard is coming from, and that makes it manageable. For a while, it is going to be the kind of hard that does not have an obvious source, the kind that just lives in you and comes out sideways and makes it difficult to trust things that deserve to be trusted. That is normal. That is what this does. Danny was listening. But here is the true part, Rex said. The thing you described tonight, the parking lot in May. You remembered it right. You always remembered it right. You tried to remember it the other way because someone told you to, and because it was safer, but the right memory stayed in you the whole time. He looked at the boy. That is what you are. Someone who holds on to what is true even when it costs something to hold it. That does not go away. He paused. You are going to build a life on top of this, Danny. and the life is going to be real, and it is going to be yours. This part, what happened to you, it is going to be a part of what you came from, but it is not what you are. The boy looked at him for a long time. How do you know, he said. Because I was you, Rex said. A long time ago in a different city, a different situation, the same shape of thing. And I was told the same thing by a man who had been it before me. He looked at Danny. And I built a life, a strange one by most measures. Not a comfortable one, but mine. Danny nodded slowly. Then he said, okay. He said it the way a person says a thing when they have decided to believe it. Not with certainty, not with the ease of someone who has never had reason to doubt, but with the specific decision of someone who has been given a reason to try. Outside in the corridor, the sound of new footsteps. Purposeful, unhurried, carrying the weight of someone who did this regularly and meant it. The foster mother was arriving. Danny heard it too. He looked at the door. He looked at Rex. You said you would stay until they came. I am here. The boy nodded. He pulled the blanket off his legs and sat up straight in the hospital bed. He looked at his braced wrist for a moment. Then he looked at the door. The door to room 12 opened. Ruth was a woman in her late 50s with reading glasses on top of her head and a paper bag in one hand that rustled when she moved. She had the particular stillness of someone who worked with frightened children regularly and had learned that the most important thing you could communicate in the first 30 seconds was that you were not a threat and that you were not in a hurry. She looked at Danny, then she looked at Rex. She gave him a nod that contained more than a nod usually held. Then she looked back at Danny. Hi, sweetie, she said. I am Ruth. I heard you might like something to eat. Danny looked at the bag, then he looked at Rex. Rex gave him a small nod. Danny looked at Ruth. What is in there, he said. She told him. She listed the contents of the bag in a tone that treated each item as genuinely interesting, as worthy of consideration, and Danny listened, and something in the listening was the beginning of something. Not the end of the hard thing, the beginning of the next thing. Rex stood up from the plastic chair. Ruth met his eyes over Danny's head and gave him the small, decisive nod of one person acknowledging another person's work. He returned it. He picked up his discharge papers from the windowsill where he had set them when he first came in and moved toward the door. Danny looked at him from the bed. Rex. Yeah, you are not a bad person, Danny said. Rex stopped in the doorway. He looked at the boy. The assessment was completely serious, delivered with the gravity of a 9-year-old who had thought about it and arrived at a conclusion. It was not meant as flattery. It was meant as a factual finding. You are not either, Rex said. Danny looked at him for another moment. Then he looked at Ruth in the bag. Okay, he said. The word came out different than it had before. Less like a decision and more like a beginning. Rex stepped into the corridor and pulled the door closed behind him. He stood in the corridor for a moment. The hospital breathed around him in its steady rhythm. Down the hall, the nursing station hummed. He looked at the closed door of room 12 for a moment, the door behind which a 9-year-old boy was looking into a paper bag being held by a woman who did this work and meant it. Then he walked down the corridor toward the nursing station where June Carver was waiting with a chart in her hands and the expression of a person who had something left to say. June was charting at the far end of the nursing station counter, the way she had been when this whole thing had started, sitting under the fluorescent lights, with her hair coming loose from its knot in small pieces around her face, her handwriting precise and even on the form in front of her. She wrote with the same focused economy she did everything else. Nothing wasted, each motion purposeful. She did not look up when Rex reached the counter, but she had known he was coming. You should probably go, she said. Your shift here is done. He almost smiled at that. He set his discharge papers on the counter and looked at it lying there and then at June. Pruitt filed a counter complaint, she said, still writing. I heard. My formal complaint is already in the system. She turned a page on the form. Wanda's counter on my internal reports is also in the system. She paused. There is going to be a review. How serious? She considered this. Serious enough. Pruitt has been here 17 years. He has relationships with the administration. She paused. I have been here 8 years. I have a record. She glanced up at him briefly. It will not be comfortable. Rex looked at her. You want me to say I am sorry about that? No, she said. She held his gaze for a moment. I want you to know I would do it again. That I knew when I whispered to you in that exam room what I was putting in motion. That it was not an impulsive decision. I know, Rex said. How? Because of the pen, he said. You kept writing. You kept the pen moving the whole time you were saying it, like you were protecting yourself in case someone was watching. That is not impulsive. That is someone who has thought it through. June looked at him for a moment. Then she said the pen was a habit. I did not think about it consciously. Still, Rex said. She looked back at her chart. Still, she said. They were quiet for a moment. Down the corridor, the door to room 12 was still closed. Somewhere above them on the floor, above the familiar sounds of a hospital night shift, settling into its rhythm, a different quality of activity, than the day, more deliberate, more focused. The emergencies sharper against the quieter background. Rex said, I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Pruitt, the way he and Sloan knew each other. The golf, the conversation the first day. Has that happened before with Pruitt and families? Has there been a pattern? June was quiet for a moment. Her pen stopped. She looked at the counter in front of her without looking at the chart. There have been other cases, she said. Other files I have had questions about. She paused. I cannot tell you as a fact that there is a pattern because I do not have access to all the files and I cannot prove causation. What I can tell you is that this is not the first time I have found Dr. Pruitt's conclusions on a pediatric abuse case to be difficult to reconcile with the physical evidence. Rex said nothing. The formal complaint I filed tonight includes that context, she said. The review will have access to prior cases. She paused. It will be unpleasant for several people. Rex nodded. Then he said, you knew that when you filed it. Yes. June turned back to her chart and picked up her pen. Rex watched her for a moment. She was not performing steadiness. She was simply steady the way some people are steady, not because they have never been shaken, but because they have been shaken often enough and have gotten back up often enough that the getting back up has become the default. One more thing, he said. June looked at him. The boy, after tonight, the case, is he going to fall through something? She set the pen down. She looked at him directly. Lorna Hicks is very good at her job, she said. The emergency protective order means Sloan cannot have access to Danny or his mother while the order is in effect. Sandra Briggs will have access to services, to housing resources, to legal aid if she wants it. She paused. Whether she uses them is her decision, but they will be available. And the long term, June looked at him. There are no guarantees. You know that. Danny is going to need time and he is going to need support, and some of what happened to him is going to come out sideways for years before it comes out straight. She paused. But he is 9 years old. He has a mother who loves him and who is talking. He has a caseworker with Lorna's track record on the case. And he had tonight someone who sat in a plastic chair and did not move. She held his gaze. That matters. The research is unambiguous on that. One person who shows up at the right time and does not move. It is one of the most powerful predictors of positive outcome in cases like this. Rex looked at her. You already know that, she said quietly. You did not need me to tell you. He looked away down the corridor. No, he said, I already knew it. Then she said without looking up, when I was 12, my stepfather broke 3 of my ribs. She said it in the same tone she said everything else, level and unembellished. Not to generate a response, just to say a fact that had a bearing on what she wanted to say next. Nobody came, she said. Not that night, not for another 4 years. I was 16 before someone in a position to do something actually did something. A teacher. She paused. I think about those 4 years quite often. Rex looked at her. She finally looked up. I have been a nurse in this hospital for 8 years, she said, and I have seen enough Dr. Pruitts and enough Wanda Teals to understand that the system is not designed to move quickly. It is designed to be careful, which is not the same thing. She paused. I have also seen on maybe a dozen occasions in those 8 years, a situation change because one person who was not required to be in it decided to stay. She looked at him evenly. Tonight makes 13. Rex was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I am going to give you my brother's number. June looked at him. Cal runs an auto shop in Broken Arrow. He knows Harkins at the DA's office, and he knows people who know people. If another case comes up and you find yourself at the end of the official channels, again, you call Cal. He paused. He will call me if he needs to, but he knows how to move things. June looked at him for a moment. Then she reached under the counter and produced a card, a plain hospital card with the St. Clement's logo, and set it on the counter between them. That is my direct line, she said. If you ever need a nurse who does not ask questions about how the injury happened, she said, and who knows 8-stitch suture work. Rex picked up the card and looked at it. June Carver, RN. A phone number. He put it in his jacket pocket. She extended her hand across the counter. He shook it the way she had shaken his in the exam room, the same firm, unhesitating grip that said equal and meant it. Rex Donovan, she said, you are not what I expected. Neither are you, he said. He picked up his discharge papers from the counter. He looked at them for a moment. The forms said he had received 8 sutures on his left forearm following a laceration caused by a fence post, that he had been treated and discharged in satisfactory condition, that he should return in 10 days for suture removal. The whole clinical account of a man who had walked in for stitches and walked out having been part of something he had not planned to be part of. He folded it once and put it in the same pocket as the card. He walked down the corridor. He passed room 12 without stopping. The door was closed, and behind it he could hear Ruth's voice low and unhurried, and the sound of the paper bag, and then Danny's voice asking a question about something, and Ruth answering it with the specific patience of someone who understood that the question was not really about what it appeared to be about, and was answering the real question underneath it. He went through the ward doors and across the main corridor and down to the lobby. Paul was still at the reception desk. The kid looked up when he came through, startled to see him still in the building after so many hours, then gave the small, uncertain nod of a person who has observed something they do not fully understand and is not sure what the protocol for acknowledging it is. Rex returned the nod, then he went through the automatic doors. The cold air hit him full in the face. After hours inside the recycled warmth of the hospital, it was immediate and complete, a full physical statement from the Oklahoma night. The parking lot was amber lit and half empty, the cars in it reduced to shapes by the quality of the light. Above the hospital, the Tulsa sky had cleared to a deep dark blue, the light pollution from the city thinning it at the edges into something that showed stars. He could see Orion tilted over the southwest, imprecise and ancient, the same configuration he had seen above every town and highway and open stretch of land he had ridden through in 25 years of riding. His Harley was where he had left it, in the spot at the far end of the lot, that he had chosen partly out of habit and partly because it was furthest from the entrance and least likely to make anyone nervous walking in. He walked to it slowly, not hurrying. The night air was doing something to the residue of the last 4 hours, not removing it, just letting it settle into whatever shape it was going to take. He stood beside the bike for a moment. He looked at his left forearm, the new bandage that June had dressed with precise, unhurried hands, the sutures underneath it, and beneath the sutures the tattoo that had been there for 14 years. He could not see it through the bandage. He did not need to. He knew what it said. He put on his helmet, straddled the bike, turned the key. The engine woke up under him, familiar and steady. He sat there for a moment before pulling out. On the inside of his left forearm, under 8 new sutures under the thin border of the bandage, the 2 small words held their ground in the skin the way they had held their ground for 14 years. Show up. Rex Donovan pulled out of the St. Clement's Hospital parking lot and rode north into the dark, and the city of Tulsa opened up around him like something that had always had room for him, even when neither of them knew it. 3 weeks after the night at St. Clement's Hospital, Cal called Rex at 7 in the morning on a Saturday while Rex was drinking coffee on the small back porch of the house he rented on the north side of Tulsa, watching a pair of crows argue over something in the alley below. Harkins wanted me to pass something along, Cal said. The emergency protective order on Sloan was made permanent 2 days ago. Judge Whitfield signed it Thursday. Rex watched the crows. Also, Cal said, Sandra Briggs has moved into transitional housing, the facility in South Tulsa, the one connected to Lakewood Regional. She is in the 6-month program. Rex said nothing. And Danny Cal said, he has been placed with Ruth Decker on a longer-term basis while Sandra completes the program. Harkins said the caseworker Hicks is describing him as demonstrating above-average resilience and engaging actively in counseling. Rex looked at his coffee. There is more, Cal said. Pruitt is on administrative leave pending review. The review is covering 3 prior cases in addition to Danny's. And Cal paused. Wanda Teal submitted her resignation. When? Wednesday. She resigned rather than wait for the review outcome. Rex set his coffee down on the porch railing. He looked at the alley. The crows had resolved their dispute and both left. Harkins also said, Cal continued, and you can take this however you want, that the DA's office does not routinely track outcomes on referrals this way. He said it himself before I could ask. Rex was quiet. He said Cal continued that the 9-year-old kid talked because someone was sitting in the corridor. He said in his experience that is not nothing. The morning light was coming sideways across the alley. The low-angle October light that has a specific quality in Oklahoma, warm and direct and slightly tilted, making ordinary things cast longer shadows than you expect. Rex looked at it for a while. "Tell Harkins." I said, "Thanks," he said. "I will." Cal paused. "You okay?" "Yeah." "All right." Cal hung up. Rex picked up his coffee again. It had gone slightly cool. He drank it anyway and looked at the alley and at the crows who had, without him noticing, returned and resumed their argument about whatever it was they were arguing about. He was okay. He was more than okay in the specific way that a person is more than okay when something has happened that cost something and produced something worth the cost, and when the ledger does not balance, because ledgers like this do not balance, but when there is enough on one side to look at without flinching. He finished the coffee, rinsed the cup, put on his jacket, and went to the garage. He spent the morning working on the Harley. Not because it needed work, it did not. It was in good condition, but because working on it was the thing he did when he needed the particular quality of attention that mechanical work requires, the focused, present tense engagement of a specific physical task, the way a well-known problem produces a steady state in the mind. He worked through the brake lines and the chain tension and the carburetor settings with the unhurried thoroughness of someone who knew the machine well enough to have a conversation with it rather than a confrontation. By noon, he had put the bike back together and cleaned up and was thinking about lunch when his phone buzzed, a number he did not recognize. He looked at it for a moment, then answered. "Is this Rex?" A woman's voice, familiar in some way that he could not immediately locate. "Yeah, this is June. June Carver." A pause. "From the hospital." He sat down on the garage stool. "June, I got your number from Cal," she said. "I hope that is okay." He said it would be okay. "It is okay." She was quiet for a moment. "I am calling because I thought you should know some things," she said, "and because I thought you might want to." "Go ahead." "I heard from Lorna Hicks this morning, about Danny and about Sandra." "I heard some of it," Rex said. "Cal called me earlier." "Then you know the main things." The protective order. Ruth Decker. Sandra in the program. She paused. "Lorna told me something else. She said Danny asked about you. He asked whether he could send you something." Rex was quiet. "A letter," June said. "He wrote you a letter." Lorna said it took him 4 sessions to write it, which she said was significant because Danny is not someone who takes 4 sessions to do anything. She paused. She wanted to know if it was okay to pass your address along to the Foster family. Rex looked at the garage floor. The concrete was oil-stained in the specific pattern of years of work. Dark pools and pale rings where solvent had been used, the accumulated record of the work done here. "Yeah," he said. "That is okay. I will tell her." June was quiet for a moment. "There is one more thing," she paused. "Dr. Pruitt's review. The 3 prior cases they are looking at. One of them is from 4 years ago, a 12-year-old girl." She paused again longer. "The case went unaddressed. The girl is 16 now. She is in a different situation. She is okay, but—" June stopped. Rex waited. "But someone should have sat in the corridor then too," June said. Her voice was even, but barely. "Someone should have been there then and was not." She was quiet. "I found the case in the file review. I have been thinking about her since Thursday." "I know," Rex said. "I know you do." They were quiet together for a moment on the phone, the two of them carrying the specific weight of the thing that cannot be undone. The 4 years that had happened because no one had been in the corridor, the girl who had been 12 and was now 16 and was okay in a way that was real, but came with a cost that should not have been paid. "You cannot go back," Rex said. "Number. You can only go forward from where you are." "I know that," June said. "I have known that since I was 16 myself." She paused. "Knowing it and sitting with it are different things." "Yeah," Rex said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I called because I wanted to tell you about Danny's letter. And because I thought you should know that what you did that night is documented now. The formal complaint, the review, the prior cases being open." She paused. "You did not just sit in a corridor, Rex. You pulled a thread and there were things attached to it." Rex said nothing. "I thought you should know that," she said. "In case you did not." She paused. "And in case it matters to you." "It matters," he said. "Good." She was quiet for a beat. "One more thing." "Go ahead." "The security guard. Carl." She paused. "He submitted a statement to the review board. He described the events of that evening from his perspective." She paused. "He said, and I am reading from the summary Lorna sent me, he said that he made a judgment error in how he initially assessed the situation, and that in retrospect, the man he had been called to remove from the patient's room was the only person in the building that night who was responding appropriately to what was actually happening. Rex was quiet. Carl is 61 years old, and he has been a hospital security guard for 16 years, June said. He did not have to submit that statement. He submitted it anyway. Rex sat in the garage on the stool and looked at the oil stains on the floor and thought about Carl Eddings, 61 years old, 16 years and standing in a doorway with his thumbs in his belt, making the calculation that every person in that hospital had been making that night and getting it wrong. And then 3 weeks later, sitting down and writing a statement that said so. That matters too, Rex said. Yes, June said. It does. They said goodbye shortly after that, the easy, undemanding goodbye of two people who have been in a situation together that left them with a shared understanding they did not need to name. Rex put the phone in his pocket and sat in the garage for a while longer. He thought about Cal, about the debt that works differently than most debts. He had gotten that from Jean-Puy, who had told him, you do not pay it back, you pay it forward. Jean-Puy had been not a good man by most definitions, 47 years old when Rex was 12, a man with a past that people in the neighborhood spoke about in specific tones. He had been the one who showed up on a cold December night and simply did not leave, and the thing that had been happening had stopped happening because he was there. Rex had asked him once years later why. Gene had thought about it for a long time before he answered. He said, because someone showed up for me once, and I decided that was a debt that worked differently than most debts. You do not pay it back. You pay it forward. Rex stood up from the stool and walked out of the garage into the October noon, which was bright and direct and warmer than it had any right to be this late in the season. The letter arrived 11 days later. It came in a standard envelope, the kind that gets sold in packs at drugstores, with Danny's name in the return address corner, in the handwriting of a child who was working hard at legibility, each letter formed with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that this particular piece of writing mattered. Rex's address was in the same handwriting. His name was spelled correctly. He opened it at the kitchen table. Inside was a single sheet of lined notebook paper folded in thirds with a small drawing in one corner of a motorcycle that was approximately accurate in its general shape and wildly optimistic in its specific proportions. The letter read, Dear Rex, I wanted to write you this because Lorna said it was okay and Ruth said it was a good idea. I have been thinking about what to say for a long time. I am in a house now with Ruth, and she makes good food, and there is a ball named Biscuit who is afraid of thunderstorms, but not of anything else. My counselor is a man named Ted, and he is okay. My mom is in a program, and she calls me every Sunday. She sounds like herself. I have been thinking about the night at the hospital. I have been thinking about the plastic chair. It made a noise when you sat in it, and every time it made that noise, I knew you were still there. That sounds small, but it was not small. I asked Lorna if I could ask you something, and she said yes. The tattoo. Show up. You said you got it when you were 30 to remind yourself of something. I was wondering if it worked, if the reminder worked. I think I know the answer because of the plastic chair. But I wanted to ask anyway. Thank you for the plastic chair. Danny Briggs. The motorcycle drawing is supposed to be yours, but I have not seen yours, so I guessed. Rex sat at the kitchen table for a long time after he read it. The morning was quiet around him. Through the window, the October sky was the clear, hard blue of late season, the kind of blue that is only possible when everything else has been stripped away. After a while, he got up and found a piece of paper and sat back down at the table and wrote, Dear Danny, the reminder worked. It keeps working. Thank you for asking. The motorcycle is close. The front wheel is a little big, but you got the engine right, which is the part that matters. Your friend Rex Donovan. He folded it and addressed it to the return address on Danny's envelope, and put a stamp on it and set it by the door to mail later. Then he sat back down at the table and looked at the drawing of the motorcycle for a while. The generous imprecision of it, the 9-year-old's confident interpretation of a machine. He had never seen the front wheel too big, the engine approximately right. He thought about Ruth's house and Biscuit the dog and a counselor named Ted, who was okay, and Sunday phone calls in which a woman named Sandra Briggs sounded like herself. He thought about the specific courage of people who do not have the option of walking away from a situation, who are inside it and have to keep being inside it and find a way to change it from within rather than from the outside. It was a different kind of courage than the kind that showed up for 2 hours and then rode away. He was aware of that. He thought about Jean-Puy one more time, Not the circumstances, not the specific details of that December night, but Gene himself, the physical fact of him, the size of him and the weight he carried in a room and the specific way he had looked at a 12-year-old boy who had been using a memorized program for a year and a half. The way he had looked and not looked away. Rex had not known at 12 that the looking without looking away was a skill. He had not known it was something a person chose. He had thought it was just what Jean Puit was. He understood now that it was what Jean Puit had decided to be. That somewhere along the line in a history Rex had never known and never would know, Jean Puy had had the same decision in front of him and had made it and had been shaped by it ever since. The way a person gets shaped by the decisions they make often enough that the decisions become the person. Rex had been 30 years old when he got the tattoo. He had been in Albuquerque 3 in the morning and outside a bar he did not remember the name of, and he had made a decision that night about the kind of man he was going to be in the years that were left to him after the years that had already happened. He had wanted something that would stay. Not as a reminder exactly, more as a marker, a line in the ground between what he had been and what he was going to be. He had walked into a tattoo parlor at 3 in the morning with his mind clear in the specific way it sometimes gets clear after a long period of being unclear. And he had asked for 2 words in plain block letters on the inside of his left forearm, and the man behind the counter had looked at him and asked him if he was sure, and he had said yes, and the man had done it. Show up. Not a manifesto, not a philosophy, just the one thing, the smallest and most specific thing, the thing that was required before anything else could be required. Be in the room, be the one who does not leave. Be the presence that the room changes shape around. He had paid it forward many times in 14 years in ways that looked different from the outside, but were the same from the inside. Danny's night was the most recent. It would not be the last. He rode for a while without a destination, which was one of the things riding was for. The north side of Tulsa gave way to the outskirts, the strip developments thinning into the wider-spaced commercial of the edge of things, auto parts, stores and tire shops, and the occasional farm supply place, sitting beside dollar stores and fast food places, the particular American vernacular of a city that had not quite finished deciding where it ended. Beyond that, the highway opened into the larger flatness, the Oklahoma winter coming in at the edges of the afternoon light. The sky enormous in the way that it is only enormous when there is enough flat to let it be. He rode for an hour, maybe a little more. He was not thinking about anything specifically. He was doing the thing that riding was for, which was the specific state of mind. It produced the focused, present tense openness of moving through something as speed, the world coming at you in continuous real-time information that required attention without requiring thought. You could not be fully inside a memory and fully inside the road at the same time. The road required you to be where you were. After enough years of riding, Rex had come to understand this as one of the most reliable forms of medicine available to him. When he turned back toward the city, the sun was low, and the light was doing what it did in the late afternoon of a clear October day in Oklahoma, which was to turn everything it touched a shade of amber that was specifically itself not the golden light of other seasons or other latitudes, but the particular late season Oklahoma amber that had the quality of something being counted out, the last of something being spent not wastefully, but with the full knowledge of what it was and what it was worth. He stopped at a gas station on the highway and filled the tank. A man at the adjacent pump watched him for a moment in the way men sometimes watch a fully patched biker when they are in an exposed location with no institutional authority nearby, the particular mix of curiosity and wariness. Rex nodded at him. The man nodded back, and the moment passed. He thought about Danny's letter, the postscript specifically, the drawing and the plain admission underneath it that he had never seen Rex's bike and had drawn it anyway from nothing but imagination and context, filling in the gaps with his best and available interpretation of what the thing must look like. There was something in that specific honesty that had stayed with Rex since he read it. Not just the drawing, but the willingness to say plainly, I do not have what I would need to do this correctly, but I am doing it with what I have. He thought that was something. He thought that was actually a considerable something. He thought about what coming out of something like this looked like from the inside at 9 years old. The reconstruction of a world you had been told was one way and was actually another. The slow, difficult work of learning to trust information from external sources when external sources had given you reason not to trust them. He thought about the counselor named Ted who was okay and what it would take to be useful to a kid like Danny, the specific patience and attention it required, and he thought that Ted being okay was probably more than it sounded like. He got back on the bike and rode the rest of the way back to Tulsa as the sky went from orange to the deep purple of early evening, the city lights beginning to define themselves against the darkening, the grid of it becoming visible from above the highway before he descended back into it. He rode through the neighborhood north of the river that he had been riding through for 3 years now, past the garage where he had lived for a while when he first got to Tulsa, past the coffee place that had the best breakfast he had found in the city. He knew these streets in the way you learn a place when you have ridden through it in all weathers and at all hours when you have been in it in the particular physical intimacy of a motorcycle rather than the filtered distance of a car when the city has presented itself to you without the usual glass between you and it. He pulled up in front of his house as the streetlights came on. The porch light was on, which meant nothing. It was on a timer, but it produced the effect of a house that had been expecting someone. He parked the bike and took off his helmet and sat on the porch steps for a while in the early dark. Danny's letter was still on the kitchen table where he had left it. He thought about it sitting there, the single sheet of lined notebook paper folded in thirds, the drawing in the corner. He thought about Danny spending 4 sessions with Ted working up to writing. It 4 sessions of approaching and retreating and approaching again, the specific courage of someone who has decided to say a true thing to a person who showed up for him and who he wants to know that it mattered. It mattered. Rex sat on the porch steps in the early dark and let that be exactly as large as it was. He had told Danny that the life was going to be real and it was going to be his. He had believed it when he said it. He believed it now. The belief had not required certainty, which was good because certainty was not available. The belief had only required that he take the available evidence and follow it to the most honest conclusion. And the most honest conclusion was that a 9-year-old who held on to what was true when it cost something to hold it, who wrote a letter that took 4 sessions to write and said plainly he was guessing, but doing it anyway was going to be okay. Not easily, not without cost, but okay in the real sense, the sense that was actually useful. He went inside after a while and heated up something from the refrigerator and ate it at the kitchen table with Danny's letter in front of him, which he was aware was unusual behavior by any measure. But he was alone in his kitchen on a Saturday night in October, and there was no one to observe it. He looked at the drawing. The front wheel was definitively too large. The engine was approximately right. He had looked at it enough times now to see what Danny had been going for, the interpretation of a machine he had never seen based on whatever mental image he had constructed from context and imagination. There was something precise in the imprecision of it, the way the drawing was confident in its wrongness, committed to the image without apology. He washed the dishes and set the letter on the counter where he would not forget it in the morning. Then he went and sat in the living room for a while without the television on, which was also unusual for him. He sat in the quiet house and let the evening come in around him. He went to bed at 10 o'clock, which was early for him, and slept without complication, which happened less often than he would have liked and happened more often on nights like this one. He woke at 6 with the particular clarity of a body that has rested sufficiently, which was its own form of information, the body's way of reporting a verdict. He lay in the dark for a few minutes and listened to the neighborhood. A car started somewhere down the block. A dog barked once and stopped. The distant sound of the highway, which was always there under everything, the continuous low-level evidence of people going where they were going. He thought about Danny waking up at Ruth Decker's house on a Sunday morning, Biscuit the dog coming in to investigate the evidence of a new day. He thought about it concretely with specific details. The smell of whatever Ruth made on Sunday mornings, the particular light in an unfamiliar bedroom when you are 9 years old and learning what familiar feels like again, the Sunday phone call coming later in the morning, his mother's voice sounding like herself. He thought it is enough. It is more than it was. He got up and made coffee and took it to the back porch. The same porch where he had been when Cal called yesterday morning and looked at the alley and the October sky going from black to the specific pre-dawn blue that has no other name in English than what it is, the color of the hour before the color begins. The crows were not there yet. They came later. He drank his coffee in the quiet and thought about the day ahead, the ordinary Sunday of it, the undetermined shape of it, the possibility it held without requiring anything specific of him. He would mail Danny's letter, He would probably ride. He would call Cal sometime in the afternoon, and they would talk about something other than that Tuesday night, because that was how things got processed in the specific language of two men who had grown up in the same house and had mostly stopped needing to say the main things out loud. He would not forget what had happened. He was not the kind of person who forgot these things. He filed them carefully in the place where he kept the things that had mattered, the things that had been real and had cost something and had produced something worth the cost. The sky got light. The alley became visible in stages, the shapes resolving from darkness into the specific Sunday morning geometry of dumpsters and telephone wires, and the back fence of the neighboring house with the wind chime that rang in the specific key of itself every time the weather moved. Rex Donovan sat on his porch in the early light and drank his coffee and looked at the morning that was coming, the ordinary, unremarkable Sunday morning of a city going about its life, and felt exactly what he felt, which was the thing that lives in the specific space between what you were and what you did with it. The crows arrived at 7:15, as they usually did, landing in the alley with the casual authority of birds who had decided that this particular alley was theirs, and had been theirs, and would continue to be theirs, regardless of whatever else changed in the world. They argued briefly about something, reached their usual unresolved conclusion, and went about their business. He got dressed and locked the house and walked to the mailbox at the end of the block. He dropped the letter in. He stood at the mailbox for a moment in the Sunday morning. Quiet, the air cold and clean, and carrying the smell of the last leaves on the trees, doing what leaves do in October. Going out in the specific way that things go out when their time is the right time for it. He walked back to the house. He got on the bike. He put on the helmet and started the engine and sat for a moment before pulling out, feeling the engine settle into its idle, the familiar voice of it, the specific vibration in the frame that belonged to this particular machine and no other. He thought about roads, the ones he knew well enough to ride without thinking, and the ones he had ridden once and remembered, and the ones he had not ridden yet and would. He thought about Cal and Marie and the two kids in Broken Arrow, the yard with copper, who barked at Clouds, the garage where the pneumatic wrench ran in the background, while a brother talked about a favor being the legal kind. He thought about June Carver on Monday morning, walking into St. Clement's Hospital with the formal complaint already filed and the review board already scheduled, in the specific steady quality of someone who knew what was coming and had decided that it was worth it. He pulled out onto the street and turned toward the highway. The city went about its Sunday around him unhurried, and preceding the particular quality of a city, at rest the traffic light, and purposeful people carrying their various lives from one place to another in the October morning. He rode through it and let it be what it was, and let himself be what he was in it, which was a man on a motorcycle in the early Sunday of a city that had over years become the place he lived. He rode north for a while, and then west, and then south in the long circuit that he took when he had no particular destination, but needed the specific medicine of moving through the world at speed, and the city turned under him, and the October light held its warm, improbable quality for as long as it could against the advancing of the season, and the engine ran clean and steady beneath him, and the road came at him in its continuous offering of right now, right now, right now. 23 bikes were parked outside the Iron Road MC Clubhouse on the north side of Tulsa when Rex pulled in that afternoon. He had not asked them to be there. He had mentioned to the chapter president, a man named Harley Boone, that he might stop by. The rest had organized themselves in the particular way of the club, word moving through the chapter on its own current, showing up as a practice rather than a response to a directive. They were gathered in the lot and in the open bay of the garage that extended from the side of the building, standing with coffee and without particular agenda, the way men gather when they have come to mark something without having a name for the marking. Harley Boone met Rex at the edge of the lot, and the two of them stood together for a moment. "Heard you had a Tuesday," Harley said. "Something like that." Harley looked at him. 22 more men were in the lot behind him in leather and work jackets, and the particular easy posture of men who had been riding together long enough to be comfortable in the space between words. They were not there to celebrate. They were not there to debrief. They were there in the way of the club's oldest tradition, which was simply to be in the same place at the same time to make the point that you were not alone in whatever you were carrying. Rex looked at them. 23 bikes. 23 men who had driven or ridden to this lot on a Saturday afternoon because one of them had had a Tuesday worth showing up for. He thought about Jean-Puy, who had been not a good man by most definitions, and who had shown up on a cold December night and not left. He thought about what Jean had said about the debt. You do not pay it back. You pay it forward. These men had not been there on Tuesday. They were here now. That was not a lesser thing. He stood in the lot for a moment and looked at the 23 bikes and the 23 men and the hard, clear sky above Tulsa and the October afternoon coming in sideways and golden across everything, and he thought, this is what it looks like from the outside. This is the thing that frightens people in parking lots and hospital waiting rooms and all the other places where the patch and the tattoos and the saws make people take different routes and look at different ceilings. This is what that thing looks like from here in the middle of it. It looks like 23 men who came to a parking lot on a Saturday to stand near someone who had done the right thing and to make sure he knew they knew it. Harley poured him a cup of coffee from the pot someone had set up on the tailgate of a truck. Rex took it. They stood in the lot and drank coffee, and the afternoon came down around them, in its October light, warm and tilted and more generous than the season had any obligation to be. And after a while, someone started talking about something else entirely, about a stretch of highway in New Mexico and the best time of year to ride it. And Rex stood in the middle of it and listened and drank his coffee and let the ordinary life of the club come back in around the thing that had happened on Tuesday. Not erasing it, just giving it its proportion. It was not small, and it was not everything. It was one night in one hospital in one city where a man had sat in a plastic chair and not moved, and a nurse had kept a pen moving, and a boy had told the truth for the first time, and a woman across town had heard her son was safe and started talking. It was one chain of cause and effect among the thousands that moved through a city on any given night. Most of them invisible, most of them untracked, most of them producing outcomes that nobody would ever know about or document or write letters about. This one had a letter with a drawing of a motorcycle and a front wheel that was a little too big. Rex Donovan stood in the parking lot of the Iron Road MC Clubhouse in Tulsa, Oklahoma, on a Saturday afternoon in late October and drank his coffee and looked at the 23 bikes and let it be enough. It was enough. The city went about its business around him, indifferent and full, and going where it was going, and the October sky held everything without preference. And somewhere in a house on the south side, a boy named Danny Briggs was learning slowly and imperfectly and with professional help and with Sunday phone calls and with a boy who was afraid of thunder what it felt like to be a child in a world that had decided to take care of him. The afternoon went on. The coffee got cold. The conversation moved from New Mexico to other highways, other seasons, other roads that waited. Rex listened and said things when he had things to say and did not when he did not, which was the grammar of the club, and also he had come to understand the grammar of most things worth being part of. You showed up. You stayed when staying was the thing required. You spoke when you had something true to say. And you rode when it was time to ride. He rinsed his cup and thanked Harley and walked to his bike. He looked at the bandage on his left forearm, still in place, the sutures underneath healing cleanly. 10 days from now, he would have them removed, and after that, the skin would close over and the scar would form. And in a year or two, it would be another piece of the map, another mark among the others, another story written in the body's record of where it had been and what it had done. Below it, when the bandage came off, the words would still be there. 14 years of weather and roads and the particular erosion of a life lived in the open, and still there in the skin, still readable, still true. He started the engine. The lot came alive briefly with the sound of it. Harley giving him a nod from the garage door, the other men lifting hands in the easy, unsentimental farewell of people who will see each other again soon. Rex gave it back. Then he pulled out of the lot and turned onto the road heading north, and the engine found its rhythm, and the city opened up ahead of him in the long October light, and he rode into it. He thought about the letter one more time as he rode. The way Danny had asked the question directly did the reminder work. Not as a rhetorical question, not as flattery, but as a genuine inquiry from someone trying to understand how a person held on to a decision over time. A 9-year-old asking a 44-year-old whether the mechanism he had built for himself was functional, whether it had worked, whether you could trust a thing you put in your skin to stay true to itself. He had answered yes. He would answer yes again. The reminder had worked not because the ink had magic properties, or because writing something down created the thing it described, but because the decision had been real when he made it and had been remade in every situation since where the question came up. The tattoo was not the decision. The tattoo was the record of a decision that got made again and again each time a corridor needed someone in it, each time a room needed someone who would not be moved. The north side of the city thinned as he rode the streetlights, spacing further apart, the strip developments giving way to the quieter edges of things, and then the highway opening into the flatness beyond the Oklahoma sky, enormous above him, in the way it is only enormous when there is enough flat to let it be. He rode for a while in the open land, in the last of the afternoon light that was doing its amber work on everything it touched, and he let the road have all of it, the weight in the release, in the particular satisfaction of a thing completed, in the only way it could be completed, which was by being present for it, from the beginning to the end, without flinching and without leaving. He thought about Jean Puy one last time. Specifically, he thought about the morning after that December night when Rex had woken up, and the thing that had been happening was not happening anymore, and he had looked at Jean Puig sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and reading a newspaper, and had tried to understand how a person could look that ordinary after what had happened the night before. He had not understood it then. He understood it now. It was ordinary because it was supposed to happen, not in the sense of being predestined or cosmically arranged, but in the sense of being the natural consequence of a decision that had been made correctly. The most ordinary thing in the world is a person doing what they said they would do. The most extraordinary thing in the world is a person doing what they said they would do when no one is watching, and the cost is real and the outcome is uncertain. Jean Puy had been drinking his coffee the next morning because there was nothing else to do after a thing like that except continue. You showed up. The thing changed because you showed up. Now you continue. The continuing was not a reward. It was just what came next. Rex Donovan rode through the last of the October afternoon and into the early dark that followed it, and the stars came out above the Oklahoma plain. One by one, the way they always did, beginning at the edges where the light pollution thinned and working toward the center, and Orion tilted in the southwest in his ancient, imprecise arrangement, indifferent to the city below and present for it simultaneously. He would go home. He would eat something. He would sleep. Tomorrow he would call Cal and they would talk about something unremarkable. The day after that he would go to work, whatever work the week held, the physical, unglamorous work of a man who had chosen a life that operated close to the ground and kept it that way on purpose. At some point in the weeks ahead in this hospital or another one in a diner or a parking lot or a late-night situation with a quality he would recognize when he encountered it, the question would come up again. The same question, wearing different clothes. Will you stay? He would stay. He had put it in his skin 14 years ago because he had wanted something in the skin to hold the answer. The answer had not needed holding. The answer was already in him, had been there since Jean Puig's kitchen on a December morning, had been there in the quiet of the exam room when a nurse kept a pen moving and said 3 words in a voice just above a breath. It had been there in the plastic chair that groaned under his weight and made a noise every time he shifted, a small, regular noise that a 9-year-old boy with ancient eyes had heard and understood meant someone was still there. It sounds small, but it was not small. Rex Donovan rode north under the October sky of Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the engine ran beneath him with its familiar steady voice, and the road ran ahead of him in the headlight's reach, and the city fell away behind him, and then began again as he came around in the circuit back toward the north side streets, back toward the house with the porch light on a timer, back toward the kitchen table where the drawing of the motorcycle still sat front wheel. Too big engine, approximately right, waiting to be looked at one more time before he put it somewhere he would not lose it. He put it in his jacket pocket when he got home. He stood in the kitchen for a moment and held the folded piece of notebook paper in his hand. The specific weight of it, the specific nothing of it by any measure that counted weight. Then he put it on the shelf above the kitchen sink where he kept the things that mattered between a photograph of his brother's kids from 2 Christmases ago and a river stone he had picked up in New Mexico on a ride that had been good for reasons he could not fully articulate and had never tried to. He looked at the shelf for a moment, then he went to bed. The next morning, the crows were in the alley again, reliable as anything in his life had ever been, arguing about whatever it was they argued about in the particular October light that was the last of its kind before the season turned for good. Rex made coffee and took it to the porch and watched them and did not try to think about anything specific and found that nothing specific was required. He was a man who had shown up, The world had adjusted itself around that fact and then kept going as it does. Somewhere in it, in a house on the south side with a dog afraid of thunder, a boy who had written a letter in 4 sessions was learning that the world could do that. Somewhere in it, in a transitional housing facility connected to Lakewood Regional Hospital, a woman named Sandra Briggs was beginning to remember who she was before she had to be someone else. Somewhere in it, a nurse named June Carver was walking into a hospital with a formal complaint already filed and the specific steadiness of a person who has decided what kind of week she is willing to have. Somewhere in it, a security guard named Carl Eddings was starting a shift with a statement submitted in a small, clear thing sitting at the center of him that had not been there 3 weeks ago. The debt moved forward. Rex drank his coffee and watched the crows and let the morning do what mornings do, which is arrive, which is be there, which is the thing itself, the simplest and most necessary thing there is. Show up. He had put it in his skin because he had thought he needed to remember. He had not needed to remember. He was the reminder. He had been the reminder since the night a man named Jean Puy had sat down in a kitchen and not left, and the debt had found him, and he had recognized it for what it was and decided that carrying it forward was not a burden. It was a privilege. He finished his coffee. He rinsed the cup. He looked at the shelf above the sink one more time, at the drawing of the motorcycle between the photograph and the Riverstone, the front wheel too big and the engine approximately right. Then he put on his jacket and went out to ride. The ride that morning took him east, first out past the edge of Tulsa where the commercial gave way to the residential and then to the semi-rural, the houses spaced further apart on larger lots, the trees holding their last leaves in the specific way they hold them in late October, not yet ready to let go, but past the point of pretending they will not. He rode through it at the pace of someone who was looking rather than arriving, taking in the details of the ordinary world, with the attention that riding produced, the way each house and yard and stretch of fence represented a life organized around its own particular logic, its own reasons for being the way it was. He thought about the review board that was meeting somewhere in the administrative structure of St. Clement's Hospital. He thought about Pruitt sitting across a table from people who were asking questions he had long assumed would never be asked. He thought about the files being opened, the cases being looked at with fresh eyes, the particular experience of having a narrative you have sustained for years, examined by people who have no investment in sustaining it. He thought about the girl from 4 years ago, the one who was 16, now the one June had been thinking about since Thursday. He did not know her name. He did not need to know her name to understand that the examination now happening, however uncomfortable it was for the people experiencing it, but as uncomfortable was a thing she deserved to have happen. Whatever form the accounting took, she deserved the accounting. He could not go back and be in that corridor 4 years ago. Neither could June. Neither could Carl Eddings, who had been standing in a different doorway at a different time, making a different calculation and getting it wrong. You could not go back. What you could do was change what happened going forward, and the review board sitting in its administrative room, asking its methodical questions, was a piece of that going forward, and it had happened because a nurse had kept a pen moving, and 3 words had been given to a man sitting in a waiting room with stitches in his arm and a specific quality of refusal to be moved. He turned south after a while, looping back toward the city in the long way, the way that took him through the area south of the river, where the neighborhoods got quieter and more residential, where the trees were older and the streets were named after the people who had laid them out 100 years ago. He passed a park where a handful of people were doing the things people do in parks on late October Sunday mornings, walking dogs and sitting on benches, and in one case throwing a football back and forth with the dedicated lack of seriousness of 2 people who are doing it because the day is available and not because they are going anywhere with it. He did not slow down, but he looked. This was the city, all of it, the hospital and the park and the garage and the house with the porch light on a timer, the DA's office, and the transitional housing facility, and the Iron Road MC clubhouse with 23 bikes in the lot. All of it in the same place at the same time, but operating on its own logic. Most of it unaware of most of the rest of it, the whole complicated, ordinary fact of it going forward through its Tuesday evenings and its Saturday afternoons without knowing or caring what any individual part of it was doing. And in the middle of it, people making decisions. Not large decisions, not the kind that got marked in any official record. The small ones, the pen still moving, the chair that groaned, the voice just above a breath that said 3 words to a stranger and then walked out of the room and let the stranger make of them what he would. The 4 sessions it took a 9-year-old boy to write a letter that said plainly it sounds small, but it was not small. Rex came up the highway on-ramp and merged into the light Sunday traffic heading north, the city spreading itself out on both sides of the raised highway, and he rode through the middle of it in the particular visibility of a man on a motorcycle exposed to the weather and the noise and the actual physical presence of the world in a way that people in cars are not, and he felt, as he often felt riding, that this was the right relationship to be in with a place. Present, permeable, moving through it without being separate from it. He got off at his exit and rode the last few miles home on surface streets, and the neighborhood came back around him in its familiar Sunday quiet, and he pulled into the driveway and cut the engine and sat for a moment in the return silence. He looked at his hands on the handlebars, the words on his knuckles, iron and road, worn to the faded quality of old decisions, the ink become part of the skin. The bandage on his left forearm, still clean, still holding. Under it, 8 sutures in a clean-edged wound made by a fence post on a Tuesday afternoon that had turned into something else. And beneath the sutures, when the bandage came off, the 2 words that had been there since a night in Albuquerque when he had decided what kind of man he was going to be. The decision held. It had held through 14 years of situations that tested it and a few that nearly broke it, and one that had simply confirmed it in a way that did not need confirming. It held the way things hold when they are made of the right material. Not because the material was invulnerable, because it had been chosen deliberately and remade every time it was tested and never once abandoned. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything. He got off the bike and went inside. He made a second cup of coffee. He stood at the kitchen counter and looked at the shelf above the sink, at the drawing of the motorcycle between the photograph and the riverstone. The front wheel definitively too large, the engine approximately right, made by a 9-year-old boy who had not seen the machine he was drawing and had drawn it anyway with what he had. Rex Donovan picked up the drawing and looked at it one more time. Then he set it back on the shelf carefully in exactly the place it had been between the things that mattered, where it would be there when he looked for it. He drank his coffee. Outside, the October morning was doing what it was doing, which was being the last of itself before something colder came to take its place. The crows were in the alley. The highway ran its continuous sound under everything. Somewhere to the south, in a house where a dog was afraid of thunder and a foster mother made good food and Sundays had a shape to them, a boy named Danny Briggs was in the middle of a morning that was ordinary, in the way that only unusual things can make ordinary mornings feel like something worth having, like something that had not always been guaranteed, like something that started in whatever small and necessary way, with a man sitting in a plastic chair that groaned when he sat in it and not getting up. It sounds small, but it was not small. It was exactly the right size. It was the size of showing up.